in the manual, the next page, page 9, has us doing the motor and mounting the motor to the frame with the fan shroud and all that business. Alright, I have to believe that you can pull this motor out of the frame without separating the frame halves. I'm not going to do that right now because we got stuff to align and everything. So you're really going to, even if you were to do this now and bolt this all on there, you'd need to leave it all loose for clutch adjustment. So we're actually going to come back once our frame halves are mated to put that motor in and get everything adjusted. Okay, so on the next page, it's showing the fuel tank before we bolt it up. Now, I was talking to Charlie Stevens, and the current fuel tank, or the fuel tank I have, has the feeder in the middle, which means it makes it very difficult to pull this tank out with the frame halves mated. The new tank is coming with the feeder on the side, so it'll make tank removal pardon me, easier later. So I'll hope to get the new tank at some point, but I'm going to go ahead and use this. So anyway, let's go ahead and get the tank out and all the supplies, and we'll build the tank and get it ready. Okay, fuel tank. Now, go ahead and open that up, and in there you got the frame bumpers. Looks like some extra clunk line, which is cool. Your pickup and weight, and the tank stopper and everything. Now, in here came a pre-cut piece and this little extra like ringlet piece, and I'll show you what that's for. What some people like to do is double that up on their on the feeder here, so it helps keep the clunk line from coming unplugged. However, I want to show you something. I'm going to go ahead and kind of pre-assemble this just for right now and put the clunk on. Now, this is the way I like to set up my clunk. I like to set up my clunk so it reaches as far back into the back of the tank as possible, okay, but doesn't rub on the back of the tank. This helps when you're climbing vertically and your tank is a little low, that you can get at that fuel. All right, you also don't want it too long. It's going to rub on the back of the tank or maybe get caught in a front corner here. All right, so I'm noticing when I kind of test fit this, and you're not really going to see this, I'm noticing that it's still quite a bit a ways from the back of the tank and not quite, you know, it looks like it's right about here, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna not use the pre-cut piece myself, all right? And I'm gonna cut one slightly longer, and I might start out a little bit too long and then have to pull it back out and trim it a little shorter, but what I want to get is so that clunk can get into these corners as close as possible without it rubbing on the back of the tank. All right, if it rubs on the back of the tank, it's going to get stuck and it isn't going to come over to the other corner. Okay, so you don't want it rubbing on the back of the tank. All right, so I'm going to cut a little bit longer. When I come back, I'll tell you the length I wound up with. Okay, so I wound up with about 75 millimeters for mine, just a little bit longer than the one that was pre-cut. All right. Now, you'll also see these little scraps that you cut off. What some people like to do is put these and double up the fuel line right at the nipples. This helps later when the fuel line starts to deteriorate from coming off the nipples easily. All right? So go ahead and double those up. Basically what I do is kind of take some silicone lube, spread it open with a pair of needle nose pliers. All right? Like so. I'd use some, and then put it on the fuel tube and then fit the fuel tube on the nipples. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, and this is the difficult part, is this rubber goes this away. All right, now one thing you'll find is you want to lube this up with some silicone or maybe some fuel. First off, the metal end kind of passes through the hole pretty tight. Now you drop this in here, you're not going to be too happy. All right, so you can also find that this rubber is a little hard to deal with. Let me pull this back out so I don't drop it in there. All right, so lube it up really well, and then go ahead and work it in and around the tank. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I haven't lubed mine up. But we're going to get that seated so this is sticking out, and then we'll come back and put the washer and nut on. Okay, so we got that in there. Like I said, just kind of work it around. Do not take something and try to poke it down in there and wind up slicing it, or you could wind up with a leaky tank. Alright, so washer goes on next. Alright, don't drop that whole unit down in there. Then the nut. Okay, now what you want to, you don't have to worry about Loctite here really, because this is kind of a it squeezes the rubber. So anyway, go ahead and tighten this up. You don't need to wail on it, all right? Just tighten it up enough that it feels snug, compresses the rubber a little bit to seal the tank, all right? So go ahead and get that tightened up, and that'll finish our assembly of the tank, and we'll go ahead and get it in the frames. Okay, tank done. Again, double check your clunk that it's not rubbing on the back, but you can kind of get in the corners as best as you can. Alright, as you can see, I've got a few threads sticking out. You don't want to wail on that and over compress that rubber. Another thing you can do when you're complete is blow into this nipple and put your finger over the vent line here in the front and see if you hear any air leaks around there. Alright, if you don't, you're good to go. Alright, before we can put this in the frame, way back on the first page and then later on this page, it shows these little rubbers, tank bumpers. Now you'll notice in the frame where they go, here there's a little notch, here there's a little notch, notch, okay, and they go on like this. Now on that first page, as you can see, they're kind of a loose fit. On that first page it says optional CA on page, let's go back there and look, way back where we didn't put them in. It says option CA dampers to frame. I kind of don't want to do that because I hate CA stuff like that, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because they are a little bit of a slidey fit. Those notches are to keep them from sliding off all the way. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and put 4 of these on, and let me just test the tank fit. If it's a snug fit, they shouldn't go anywhere, and you don't need to use CA. 1 second here. You get them all on. Okay, and we'll test fit the tank. And actually, rather than burn video, well, let's just go ahead and do it. Test fit the tank and see how loose it is. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and CA mine to the frame, okay? So go ahead, take them off, just a drop now. What you can do is just peel them up a little bit, run some CA on there, put them on. Don't make a mess. As you know, when CA dries, it'll leave white smoke everywhere and make your frame look terrible. So just a little bit, keep them in place, and let's go ahead and do that. Put the other 4 on the other half of the frame as well. We'll come back and continue. Okay, we got the tank bumpers on and everything. Now, one last thing before we button the frames. It does look like you can put this in with the frames together, but I'm going to follow the manual on this one, and that is this piece up here, this angle arm, this rod with the 4 flat spots, the ball, the set screws. And when you first opened the frame bag and took your main frames out, there were 2 bearings in a Ziploc. We're going to need those too. Alright, so open bag 8 and get this angle arm or this arm out with the ball. Go ahead and get this rod out. Be careful, there's a small bag with a bunch of little washers and stuff, and we'll show you where those go, but we need to pre-assemble this and get ready to put it in the frame. So go ahead and get those out. We'll continue on. Okay, so first up, let's go ahead and just mount this ball. It comes with a screw and a ball. It goes on the inside of the arm. Go ahead and get that on, and then we'll use the 2 set screws to put this on this shaft. Okay, so if you look closely at the shaft, there's 4 flat spots on it. Now the 2 inner ones are going to line up with the 2 holes in this arm. Okay, so you're going to feed this through, line up the flat spots, kind of center it up, alright? And then what I like to do to make sure I'm on the flat spot, make sure the shaft isn't partially twisted, is just kind of snug it a little bit and then back it off a little bit and make sure that I can move the shaft in and out, but it doesn't pass the flat spots. Alright? Now, at this point, I can see that there's a little bit of play on the flat spots. Alright? Just a little bit of in and out play. So, and I'm not sure what that's going to affect later for these other flat spots for the arm. So, what you want to do is center this up as best as you can. Alright? Don't have it biased one way or the other. Just kind of center it up. You can look in the hole. Then go ahead and put your Loctite on. Loctite those 2 set screws. Make sure they're tight. Super important. You don't want this slipping on that shaft. And we'll continue on. Okay, we've got the part together. Now this bag with the spacer washers and these tiny screws, they come at a later step. So set them aside. I wouldn't open that yet. Alright, so the next thing is, you remember the 2 bearings that were in the frame bag when we first opened it. You'll see a very large hole right here between these 2 bearing blocks. Alright, and you'll notice the bearing has a flange on one side. You want the bearing to go on the inside of the frame, okay, with the flange this way. This will keep the bearing from pushing out of the frame, and the arm inside will keep it from coming out of the frame this direction. So the flange goes on the inside of the frame. Okay, and then you go ahead and put your A arm on. 1 second here. I want to see which way it goes. Bear with me. Looks like it's pointing toward the front of the helicopter. So as you can see, if I put it in one way or the other, the wrong way, it's going to be a problem. If I put it in this way later, and I button these frames together, I'm going to have a heck of a time flipping it around. So it does not go that way. It goes with the arm facing toward this hole in the frame, like so. Alright, so we've got that in place, and now at this point, we're going to go finish up the other side of the frame and get ready to button these two halves together.